Welcome, everyone, to our brand new podcast called Getting Deep with a PhD and a JD.
So, Kimmie, I have a question for you, of course.
Ready?
Okay. So, Kimmie, what is one of the biggest misconceptions about sexual assault?
So I would say what the biggest misconception is one of the causes of what causes a person to engage in that type of abhorrent behavior. And that's power as opposed to any sort of actual sexual desire. It's more about power than that.
Yeah,
So that's what we're talking about today.
absolutely. So, today we are going to be talking about sexual violence and power, the combination of power. And before we get into the episode, we also want to mention that we're speaking specifically about heterosexual relationships today. We want to acknowledge our friends within the LGBTQIA community. And some of the things that we talk about will be relevant for that community, but some of the things are different. And we really want the LGBTQIA community to not feel like we are just saying one size fits all. And so we've
There are
decided,
nuances.
so we've really decided to focus this episode on heterosexual relationships. And in the future, we will, do some different focus on different groups. But today, it's important that you all know that this is the group.
And maybe, we can, I don't know, I wonder if we can have like a special guest, from the community
That would be great.
join us to talk about it, because it's always important to have that authenticity, that closeness
Absolutely.
associated with that community to talk about that community, I think
Absolutely.
that's important. So maybe we can.
And
maybe we can
representation matters, right?
Yes,
And
does.
it would be great to
Absolutely.
have somebody. I think that's a fabulous idea. And I have some folks in my head, like
Okay.
names of folks. So
Yeah.
we should do that. We can have a guest
I
pop
think we're
in.
ready. Look,
I think
we're ready
so.
for guests.
I think we're ready for guests. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
So, and I think another context that we want to provide for this conversation is, when we talk about sexual violence, whether it's, assault, rape, harassment, you'll hear us talk in the context of man to woman. When we talk about the aggressor, the aggressor and then the victim.
Or the perpetrator.
The perpetrator and the victim. Yeah, I like that word better. And, we know that, it could be the opposite. But generally speaking, when we see these incidences of violence, it's still a majority where the man is the perpetrator and the woman is the victim. That is a majority of these instances. One of the resources that I looked at said that, and this was through Psychology Today, they were quoting CDC and the National Sexual Violence Resource Center, where their statistic was that 18.3% of women reported experiencing rape at some time in their lives, as compared to 1.4% of men. And I think, Nikki, you may have some other statistics as well. But that's just sort of the framework within which we are talking today when we talk about the perpetrator and the victim.
Yeah, and I think when we think about violence and encompassing, like, whether it's sexual violence, physical violence, whether it's like sexual assault or whether it's rape, when we think about, okay, who has had this happen to them. So we're probably looking at about 1 in 3 women, and probably about 1 in 7 men. And
Hmm.
so we're looking at quite a few folks who have had some type of violation done, whether it's physical, whether it's actually sexual, whether it's rape. But so there are a lot of folks out there who have perpetrated against another person, and sometimes the perpetrators, or sometimes the survivors or the victims, sometimes end up being perpetrators of other types
Hmm.
of
Hmm.
violence.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But but for this episode, because what, and just as with all of the other topics that we analyze and get deep about, we can talk forever about, and there's so many different nuances, there are so many different offshoots, that
hmm,
we could talk for hours.
yeah,
But I think what led us to having this particular conversation is, obviously, I think everybody knows what's in the headlines, this past week, with and also really within the past couple of years, with
yeah.
the Me Too
Me Too
movement.
movement.
But the question that I had posed to you, was, so we see these perpetrators, which the majority of them have been men, at least, the cases that garner our attention are,
Yeah.
celebrities and things like that, and they've been men. Is these are men who have succeeded in their respective crafts. Um, they have been able to influence entire generations
Mhm,
with their creativity, with their work ethic.
mhm.
You
Their
know, they've
talent.
they've been
Yeah.
able to acquire great levels of resources. When we talk about money and assets, right?
Hmm.
So I'm thinking, okay, so it's like you have the world, but yet you still need to engage in this kind of behavior. Why?
Yeah.
And that's what led us to look, a little bit deeper into this idea of power fueling their behavior.
Yeah.
So that was the question.
Yeah. And one of the reasons this is in the headlines right now is because of New York and the Adult Survivors Act. And so, we have this thing called the statute of limitations, which really puts a timeline on when you can report a crime. And so what New York did is New York said, "Hey, wait a second. Let's give, because we know we have so many folks out there who have not reported, and the time for reporting has it's too old to report." So what they did is they gave a year starting Thanksgiving 2022 to Thanksgiving 2023. They gave folks a year to report some of these crimes that may have occurred a long time ago. And the person had to be 18 years old when the
Mhm,
crime was committed. And
mhm,
so as a result, we saw just even in the past week a bunch of high profile folks who had some cases brought against them.
mhm,
And so, just like Kimmy mentioned, we said to ourselves, okay, these are people who have lots of money, and if they wanted to engage in any kinds of activity, they could pay somebody to engage in whatever kinds of activities they wanted to engage in.
mhm,
And
mhm,
so the question was about, why do you feel the need to violate another person,
mhm,
knowing that you have all of this power
mhm.
and you have all of these resources,
Mhm.
and why do you take the risk? And
Why?
so,
Yeah,
yeah, why
exactly.
take the risk?
Yeah. And a couple of things that I wanted to clarify, in that the Adult Survivors Act gives survivors the ability to file a civil action.
Yes,
So they can't. It's still not criminally. It's
correct.
still not being pursued criminally. Only civilly. And I wanted to clarify that, but I also wanted to bring up that context of, with the history of reporting, any kind of sexual abuse, harassment, the I've been hearing people talking about, oh yeah, this is just a money grab. This is just a money grab. And it's like, yeah, that that's what the civil system in
Right.
general is about. It's about getting paid for your pain. It's about getting paid for the breach of contract. It's about getting paid for what someone stole out of your home. It's about getting paid for someone murdering your loved one.
Yeah.
It's
Who has
about
impacted your life in a
it has
way.
impacted your life.
Yeah. In a
And
way, and you need compensation for that.
we have
Yeah.
a whole system built upon that theory. So it really annoys me when I see that sort of commentary from
Right.
people when, they're upset, or you know they feel like what's going on is wrong, as opposed to
Wrong.
the behavior
Well,
being wrong. So,
you know what I even think? I even have to go back and say, it is really hard to step up and say, I have been violated.
yes,
It is really
exactly.
hard to step up because you don't just have to just step up and say I was violated, but you have to give
And you get
details.
paid.
You
No,
have
that
to
doesn't
put
happen. Yeah,
exactly, you have to make a report. You have to put down the facts. And
corroboration.
that is very traumatizing. And
Yes.
so for people to say that people are just doing this for a money grab or just because they're gold diggers or anything else,
Hmm.
that really diminishes just the strength that folks have to even come forward.
To come
Because
forward.
we do know that a lot of times these things are not reported.
Hmm.
And
And the reason
so,
they're not reported is because the victim becomes um the uh the villain.
yeah, they become victimized a second time.
Hmm.
Because a lot of times what happens is and unfortunately, um, there have been some high profile cases where this has happened where someone will come out and they will start to talk about their victimization and then or they're having been victimized, and then all of a sudden the questions are, well, let's talk about that person and how they either are lying or brought this on themselves. I
Yes.
mean, I know lots of folks. I remember the Anita Hill hearing. you
Yeah.
know I remember
Hmm.
the Hill hearing, and I remember hearing about how she was a horrible person you
Hmm.
know
Hmm.
and now I hear people who said that she was a horrible person. Now I hear people saying, whoa, Anita, or should I say, Dr. Hill did
Yeah.
try to tell us something.
Yeah. She tried to tell us.
She tried to tell
Absolutely.
us. Yeah.
Absolutely. So when we talk about, okay, so, our question, why are these people engaging in this behavior when they seemingly have it all already?
Right.
And if this really was about sexuality, they could get this, they could get it from, willing participants.
Absolutely. I mean, there would be people lined up that would
Who would not have
people
a
would probably even say, you don't even need to pay me.
problem because this is and
Yeah.
I'm willing and able to do this. So, we've been hearing, now that, the conversation is sort of making its way. We're forcing the conversation. I wouldn't even say it's being allowed. We're
Hmm.
forcing the conversation. We're saying that this behavior, it needs to be addressed, needs to
Right.
be punished. That
Right.
conversation is becoming much more, right. And so it's not, I don't think for most people it's not the first time that they've heard this idea of power being the motivating factor here.
Hmm.
But there's still a great number of us who are willfully ignorant of that. And then there are others who are just generally questioning, what does that really mean? What does
Yeah.
it actually mean?
What does it
And
mean?
mhm,
Because you can have a person can have power
mhm,
and make the decision that they're going to use their power in a very positive way to actually help folks and to make positive change.
mhm,
Or you can have a person who has a whole lot of power and they end up using their power to harm people.
mhm. And so the question is, why do they do that, right?
Why do they do that?
Yeah,
Yeah.
and it's like, and
Yeah.
for those people who are still questioning whether or not that's the case, because I can't tell you how many times I've seen, like in my feed or whatever, it's the ignorance of, oh, well, why is that? He doesn't need to rape anybody. He doesn't need to do this and that. Or that
Exactly.
person wasn't attractive. Why would he feel? And but that should be it's like you're answering your own question,
Exactly.
because there's no denying that the behavior occurred. And one of the articles that I read, and the title of the section was "Proof That It's About Power." And the passage says, when an elderly woman of 80 years or a young child is sexually abused, it should be obvious that this act is not about sex, sexual attraction, sexual passion, lust, nor gratification, and it's not about any of those things. So just thinking logically about the situation, it should be
Right.
clear that that's not what it is. And so we get into the discussion of what supports it, and what starts it. And I think one of the things that I found was that um, the fact that we have oppressive attitudes and beliefs
Mm-hmm.
is the start. So the oppressive attitude and belief. So what do we know about the gender norms and gender inequality, right?
Right.
Is that
Right.
women are viewed as less important, lesser than.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Not as powerful.
and not as powerful.
Yeah.
And so you have this system of oppression that supports the abhorrent behavior. And that's kind of where you start.
Right. And it's also when we think about the whole concept of masculinity,
Mm-hmm.
and I think we can't have this conversation without bringing up toxic masculinity, or that the
Yes.
concept of toxic masculinity, because I think
Mm-hmm.
that the way we perceive what is considered male and what is considered male is considered powerful. And how is that power demonstrated? It's
Demonstrate. Yeah.
demonstrated by being able to physically exert power over another
Control.
person and
Mm-hmm.
control over another person.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and what's one way that you do that? Sexually,
Mm-hmm.
whether it's by telling jokes, inappropriate jokes, making people feel uncomfortable, and
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you've had this, but I've had situations where people have made me squirm because they've
Mm-hmm.
said things that have just been so inappropriate. And
Mm-hmm.
then, or so whether it's that, or whether it's actually harassing,
Mm-hmm.
really harassing, or whether it's actually taking it to the step where you are physically
Mm-hmm.
violating someone.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, yeah,
And
we,
it's about one of the things that stood out to me is the word the idea of humiliation. So so when you look at sexual violence, it's about entitlement, number one.
Mhm.
So it's about entitlement, which speaks to the idea of, oh, well, this person can go get this from a willing party. But to them, the idea of power is to assert it over someone who's not willing, because you
Exactly.
feel entitled. So if somebody isn't willing to give something to you, you have to make them. And in that way you feel power.
Uh-huh.
Dominance, of course, power, control, and then humiliation.
Yeah.
That's the other word that I never readily associated with it. And for some reason it just sort of stood out to me.
Well, and I want to say that in order, so there has to be a mechanism that says that this is okay.
Mm-hmm.
And when we look at the research, what we find is that it's the peer group. So when you have folks and you're doing these behaviors, if people aren't challenging you, or if they're not stepping up and saying that these behaviors aren't right, then you may hear that these behaviors are okay. And
Mm-hmm.
that becomes your norm, and that becomes what
Mm-hmm.
you do. And
Mm-hmm.
so there's a there's a potential for the peer group to influence folks.
Yeah.
And I wonder about, like, the situations, because we're reading a little bit about the women who have come forward about
Mm-hmm.
these pretty high profile cases.
Mm-hmm.
And in these cases, the women talk about other people knowing.
Yes.
So these aren't situations where a person is doing this behind closed doors and no one else. And we do have those situations. I know when I worked in intimate partner violence, we had a lot of situations where people only violated the partner in the house, and they
Mhm.
could go to work and they seemed like a nice person. But to get back to this situation, these are situations where people are saying, okay, so and so saw this happen. And it was so seen as so normal that it didn't raise any alarm bells.
But
Um,
if it, I yeah, I definitely think that there has to be a level of acceptance, right, from the peer group.
right.
Um, but I also feel like there still is this level of what's the word I'm trying to think of? There's this level of retribution that people who see it and they know it's wrong
Uh-huh.
and they still don't say anything
They're
because
bystanders, right? The
they're
bystanders to see
afraid
it. Yeah.
that they will then become a target of this particular perpetrator.
Mm-hmm.
That they're afraid
Yeah.
because no one will come forward to say anything out loud or to challenge this person because the person has so much influence, has so much control over your job, and and your livelihood, that you aren't willing to step forward and say, hey, stop doing that, that's wrong.
Right. And so that is a key piece of what I was saying as well, because if the person doesn't step up and say that it's wrong, the silence is
Hmm.
also taken as acceptance and that
Hmm.
it's okay,
Hmm.
you
Yeah.
know, and that you're right, that silence could be driven by a person feeling like, oh, if I say anything, I'm not going to be um, seen as being masculine, or I'm going to be seen as whining, or this person has given me a job. And
Hmm.
so this person might not want to hire me, or so,
Hmm.
yeah, yeah,
But doesn't that also speak to the that very definition of how that person perceives power, the perpetrator. So the how that person perceives power, I think all of that plays into it, right? So is it that the silence is making it acceptable, as opposed to the silence feeding into this idea that I have so much dominance and control? I
hmm,
know it's wrong. They know it's wrong, but I can still do it because I am who I am.
yeah. And so I wonder if there's a conscious acknowledgement of that, or if it if this is part of that cycle, that um the reinforcement cycle, like, that
Mm-hmm.
goes on.
Mm-hmm.
And either
Mm-hmm.
way, it exists, and it's detrimental to the
Mm-hmm.
person who's being abused.
And that whole sort of ecosystem, for lack of a better
Yeah.
word, right? It does. I mean, what you're saying is true. I think, to me, I guess I'm looking at it as what you're saying is true. Um, and that's what sort of starts it before it even gets to this point. By the time it's gotten to this point, we've already created this idea of acceptance, right? So, like, when
Yeah.
I was reading the article, I read an article. I found an article from this organization called Association of Alberta Sexual Assault Services, and it kind of goes through this discussion of how we get to that point
Hmm.
of that having that sort of system of oppression to that level where somebody can physically beat someone in front of others, and
Others, yes.
it still goes unchecked, right? That's sort of that's an extreme, extreme expression of what this idea of what this system of oppression and beliefs allows it to get to that point. And so it starts with the oppressive attitude, right? So it starts with normalizing locker room talk,
Yes.
normalizing boys will be
Be
boys.
boys. Yeah. Having
Allow,
different standards for girls and boys.
mm-hmm,
Yeah.
yeah, telling sexist jokes, making degrading, demeaning comments, the music that we, the extreme misogyny in music, right? Especially, I just know hip hop, right? I don't know what level of misogyny exists in other genres of music. But that's been my experience.
Yeah.
Is the extreme level of misogyny that's accepted in hip hop music. So it's all of those. It's all of those things that lead to this ecosystem that we're talking about of extreme abusive behavior. And so when I was looking up, why is sexual violence an expression of power? And one of the articles talked about various theories associated with it. And one of the feminist theories was, and one of the quotes from that was that because masculinity is learned, and we can insert toxic now, because back in the day, what they deemed as masculine really is toxic, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So because toxic masculinity is learned, in order for a man to experience power, he must engage in accepted social practices such as sexual violence that prove his masculinity.
There's so many things wrapped up into toxic masculinity, and unfortunately, sometimes people, because of the fear of not being perceived as masculine or as male, sometimes people are willing to turn their face away, or or they're willing to just ignore or accept things that are not
that they know
that they know are wrong. Yeah.
So I think this is a good I'm the resident timekeeper, and we've it's been 29 minutes already, girl.
Oh my goodness.
I think we've determined that this idea that power is associated with being able to express it in an abusive and oppressive way. You have to still have that attitude and belief to begin with. And so I think when we were talking about what would be a good call to action, would to start with your and we can't forget to say that women are implicit in their own internalized oppression. When we're talking, once again, now we're talking about, in general, perpetrators in these kinds of situations tend to be men, and victims tend to be women, although it is vice versa, most definitely. And women engage in creating these oppressive beliefs and ideas in their sons as well as the fathers do. And so I think a call to action would be to take stock of how you, both mothers and fathers, are raising their sons. Because I can't tell you how many countless times I hear them talking about, okay, well, I make sure I tell my daughter to do this, that she shouldn't wear this, that she shouldn't go anywhere at night without a friend, that she shouldn't. But I never hear, just in discussion, oh, I tell my son that he shouldn't engage in this behavior.
Right.
That he shouldn't, if a girl is saying yes and then she says no, you should stop it. Or it's not okay that because this girl was at a party where there were a majority boys, or she was walking by herself at night, there shouldn't be a discussion of that. The discussion should be, you should not engage in this kind of behavior. Hard stop.
This behavior is not acceptable. This behavior does not make you a man. This behavior does not make you a man. And also thinking about with women, how they raise their girls as well, because as women, sometimes we are raised to believe that, well, if somebody does this to you, or if this happens, well, that's just going to happen, because that's just how men are. Instead of seeing it as being a violation, it's normalized as this is just the way things are. And so really helping girls and helping young women to have a voice and to be able to express what they want sexually and what they don't want sexually, and also to see themselves as being valuable and capable of making decisions
Mm-hmm.
and not just relying on a man to make decisions, or not just going along with whatever happens because men are like that anyway,
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yes. Um, and I also think when we talk about the peer group, remember you were talking about the standards that are set within your peers,
Yeah.
and I think that men should start taking stock of their own peer group and holding members of their peer group accountable for damaging commentary, demeaning commentary,
Hmm.
sexist behaviors and jokes, because that all contributes to where we ended up with last week.
Right, right,
Not
right.
everybody engages in the physical expression of their idea of what power represents, but it all contributes to it.
Yeah. And if you create an environment where it's okay for people to tell sexist jokes, you
Mm-hmm.
know, and
Mm-hmm.
I'm the first person. I love comedy.
Mm-hmm.
I love laughing and I love joking. And I am the first person to say there is a difference when you are in an environment, you are in a work environment and you are telling jokes or you are making comments or you are even doing something like, um, one of my friends was telling me about somebody who posted a calendar,
Mm-hmm.
like a girly calendar in a professional office setting with
Mm-hmm.
a predominantly male environment that just had a couple of women, you know? And
Mm-hmm.
so really
Mm-hmm.
just
Mm-hmm.
being aware and thinking about what that could mean, and if these things are just normalized, you
Mm-hmm.
know,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
what does that mean? Yeah. And so, yeah, so the sexist jokes,
Mm-hmm.
and even if you're a person and you have boy children and girl children, um, are you treating them differently based on their gender because you believe that there are gender expectations?
Mm-hmm.
Are you telling little girls, you know, don't don't do that because that's being too grown. Whereas, are you telling little boys, be the man of the house
Mm-hmm.
when I'm not
Mm-hmm.
here?
Yeah.
So those are
Exactly.
different expectations, and those things eventually lead to people having different understandings and different perceptions of what it means to be male and female,
Mm-hmm.
and then that leads to one being perceived as better than the
And
other,
the
and
other.
it leads
Mm-hmm.
to this power differential
Mm-hmm.
that we see being
Mm-hmm.
acted out.
Yeah.
So, um,
Okay.
one of the things that and I don't think we said this, but I think we talked about this before the show about our current laws
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
and thinking about what are your laws? Like we know that New York just made this change where they allowed folks to do a civil suit, even though,
Mm-hmm.
so what are the laws where you live? Like, are there situations where women, um, there are things in that are entrenched in the law that will make women not report? Um, so what are your laws? Really
Mm-hmm.
take some action and think about your laws and think about what needs to be changed. I know one of the other things we were talking about is we were talking about rape survivors in custody.
Yeah.
And so you you'll be interested, it's very interesting looking at rape survivors in custody and thinking about, okay, where do you live and what are the laws surrounding rape survivors and custody
Because it may
of
not be
the
what you
child?
expect it to
Because
be.
it may not, yeah, it may
Yeah.
not be what you expect it to be.
Because the perpetrators are often can pursue custody
Custody.
of the children
Yes.
that are created
Yes.
from this, violence act. Yeah.
Right.
Because I
Right.
think you found it was half of the states. What was that?
Half of the
What was that?
states said that, ooh, I can't
In
remember
order
now.
to terminate parental rights.
Terminate parental rights. Yeah, they had to be found only in half. They had to be found guilty of committing the rape.
Yep.
Yeah, in
And
order
we
to
know how
have
often that doesn't happen.
exactly. And that's the other thing. I mean, the the legal system,
Hmm.
how people are even interviewed, how survivors go through the system, how perpetrators go. So it's just, it's, there are lots of reasons why people report and why they don't report. And we do know
Which,
that the
which
conviction rate is very low,
which makes it so
very, very low.
incredulous when you hear people say, "Oh, they just out here to make, they just out here to say this." Like, that's so incredulous because more times than not, the person who's making the allegation is often, rung over the coals.
Right.
They
And,
really.
and the other thing that I hear a lot of is I hear, oh, well, that person is not telling the truth. And maybe there are people who recant, or maybe there are people who make false reports.
Mhm.
That's a possibility. People
Of
do.
course.
There are people out there that make false reports, but there are people who make false reports about break-ins or
Yes.
having their car stolen.
Yes.
But statistics will show you that people who make false sexual assault or rape convictions, the percentage is very, 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 very small,
Yes.
especially when you compare the people who make false reports about other crimes.
Yeah.
So
And you
we
don't hear
really
the
need
same
to
discussion like, "Oh
exactly
man, you just out here to make some money."
just
Like,
make some money reporting your car stolen or
yeah,
reporting this. Yeah, there are, it's just, so we need to, and that's another thing, we need to stop. We need to rethink how we think about sexual assault and rape.
mm-hmm.
We need to rethink as we need to think about them as crimes and not about, oh, you were just too enticing. That person just wanted some sex.
Right.
Taking the sex away and thinking about power and control.
Because that's what it's
Because
about.
that's what it is. Power, control, degradation, humiliation.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So, our final segment, we'll get to it since we're running out of time.
Yeah.
Our tell me something good. We always try to find the light at the end of the tunnel. Because a lot of the issues that we talk about are, can be seen as some of the issues that we talk about can be seen as detrimental. So we like to leave you with something good. And I think the fact that we're having more of these conversations out in the open, and we're seeing these high level individuals being held accountable is the tell me something good.
Absolutely.
In this
Absolutely.
situation.
And I think, you hear more people writing about their own experiences.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's the more you hear, because we know that it exists, and the more you hear people writing about their experiences and stepping up, I think that it makes people realize that this isn't just boys being boys, and this isn't just a normal thing.
Mm-hmm.
These are situations that we really need to talk about, that we really need to make sure that we have the laws in place to really punish and compensate the victims or the survivors,
Yeah. So the fact that there was a settlement reached in this most recent high profile case, that's to tell me something good. I mean,
within a day.
within a day.
The next day, I mean, we heard, oh, wait a second, they
Mm-hmm.
settle. But there was another person who filed a suit.
Another suit. That's going to open. It continues to open the floodgates for people who have been abused to come forward
Right.
and hold these people accountable, because you can't just be out here terrorizing people. That's what
Exactly. And chances are
you're just
terrorizing people. Yeah.
Yes.
And chances are, if there's one victim, the level of degradation that I've read
Mm-hmm.
about from these reports,
Mm-hmm.
if there's one victim,
There's
that would
10.
yes, there are many others, because the level of just humiliation and just it's just some of these reports have just really been very, very shocking.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What's occurred. And
Yeah.
so
And
yeah,
he didn't just wake up that morning and
and
decided
just decide I'm going to be a terrorizer. you know
that's been going on. Yes.
exactly.
So,
And people knew about it.
and people
And people knew
knew.
about it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh God. That's, it's the silence is as much a contributor as anything else.
People are complicit. The silence becomes complicity. Yeah.
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 All right. Well, that was a good discussion, Nikki. We were at 42 minutes, so
Oh,
we've held these people on for a little bit longer than we like.
That's true. That's true.
Our listeners and viewers.
Yeah. So we are very excited to really engage in these conversations, and we're just really enjoying this, and we love it when you like and subscribe.
Yes, and we're enjoying your comments, so keep them coming. The holiday, we just had a holiday week, so we're a little bit slow on responding to a couple of the comments that we've gotten, but believe me, we've seen them and we appreciate them. We'll get around to responding and acknowledging your sentiments and thoughts about what we're talking about. So keep them coming.
Keep them coming. Yeah. And also let us know about any additional topics that you would like for us to cover. We really want to be able to provide just a good platform that is based on what you all really like to hear and topics that you all are interested in. So please let us know.
Yeah. All righty. Well, until next time. Bye.
Bye.